What's up guys, my name is Joe and we are back with another episode of British Guy Reacts, and we're returning with some NFL content. Today the video is titled The NFL's Logistics Problems by Wendover Productions, so go check out their YouTube channel. If you are new around here, click the subscribe button, give the video a like, comment down below on other reactions you want to see. I'm not exactly sure what this video is going to entail, so we're just going to jump straight in and find out for ourselves. Let's go!
Sports league in the world makes more money than the American National Football League.
I thought the
The
Premier League
NFL
might.
earns more yearly revenue than the English Premier League, the Champions League, Formula One, the Japanese Nippon Professional Baseball League, and the Continental Hockey League.
Yo, you guys are killing us. I thought the Premier League might have had you, you know. You're killing us, you double us, more than double. Champions League, not surprising because it's a short competition. Formula One as well. Yo.
Combined.
Okay.
It is by far the largest sports league in the world by revenue. Making up the NFL are 32 football teams, each themselves essentially acting as their own distinct businesses. These teams are spread out all across the contiguous United States, some only 30 miles or 45 kilometers apart from each other, some nearly 3,000 miles or 4,500 kilometers apart. Now, American football teams are some of the largest in sports, both physically and in numbers. They have a roster of 56 players, the majority of which play in any given game. These players weigh on average about 250 pounds or 110 kilograms. This team size leads to some particular travel needs. Players each require a first-class seat or, at the very least, the seat next to them free in economy, meaning those 56 players take up far more than 56 seats. On top of that, a team typically brings more than 100 support staff and an immense amount of cargo to each away game.
I would almost think that the amount of money these guys made, they just have some massive private jets, but maybe that's not cost effective, but, you know.
More than 100 support staff and an immense amount of cargo to each away game. With the exception of the largest, most valuable ones, most other professional sports teams in the US will just fly on chartered narrow-body aircraft like A320s, 737s, or 757s. But most NFL teams, given their size, require something larger.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't
NFL
get private
teams
jets
tend to
that big.
charter their aircraft from commercial airlines, American, Delta, United, or Hawaiian Airlines, and they'll typically fly something a bit larger than other teams like a 767 or sometimes even a 777, but the nature of this charter job makes finding a plane to take them particularly difficult. You see, let's take the example of the New York Jets' last game of the 2018 season versus the New England Patriots on December 30th. For this game, they left the day before on a United Airlines 767-400 at 3:37 p.m., landing 30 minutes later at 4:07 p.m. in Providence, Rhode Island. The plane then sat on the ground at Providence Airport for the next 26 hours until the game was over. The following day, the plane took off at 6:30 p.m. bound for New York. The aircraft's previous flight had been to Buenos Aires, and its next flight was to London, and yet for these 26 hours, United only made money from the half-hour charter flight to and from Providence. It's easy to understand why this wouldn't really be worth it to the airline, but at least the jets are located next to a United Airlines hub at Newark Airport. Many teams, like the New Orleans Saints for example, are not located in a city with any airline hub. That makes finding an airline to take their charter contract even more difficult. That's because, for example, when the team had to travel to Charlotte last season, the 767 that took them had to fly in empty from Houston, the nearest United hub, then fly to Charlotte, sit on the ground for 33 hours, fly back to New Orleans, then once again fly empty, this time all the way to New York.
I know America's massive, but this distance isn't that far, right? Surely they could do I know it's not the best for the players, but a road trip or even trains. Do you guys not have like high-speed trains there? I don't know. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but it's just a suggestion there. Do you have to fly to these fairly close places? I know it's not that close, but...
All told, for those 2 hours and 51 minutes of flight time United was paid for,
it is a
they
long
used
flight,
this
though.
airplane for almost 44 hours. Being located away from an airline hub, where planes are based, means charter flights will almost always require a plane flying in empty. It is for this reason that airlines are raising rates or just flat out stopping flying NFL teams as they find normal commercial flying a more lucrative use of their aircraft. American Airlines in recent years, for example, dropped all the many teams they previously flew except for the Carolina Panthers, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles, 3 teams located at their hub airports. More teams have moved their contract to dedicated charter companies such as Atlas Air or Miami Air International, while the New England Patriots even bought their own set of planes to solve this issue.
See, New England, they know what they're doing. You just buy, like I said, maybe a private jet's not big enough, but you just get a couple of them, a few of them. Surely in the long run it's more cost effective. I don't know. Or get an airline to sponsor your team, you know. Get a new stadium out of them while you're at it.
Some other teams still have contracts with commercial airlines, but have switched to flying multiple smaller planes as these can be in less demand. The Indianapolis Colts, for example, now typically travel in 2 Delta 757s, leaving within a half hour of each other. Other American sports, such as hockey, baseball, and basketball, don't have nearly as much of a problem because they play far more games a season, which makes their contract a more attractive one to airlines, and they also typically use smaller aircraft, of which there are more available. The NFL briefly considered investing in its own fleet of aircraft or at least negotiating a deal with an airline in bulk, like the NBA does with Delta, but for now, NFL teams are seeing their travel costs skyrocket as the laws of supply and demand take hold. After losing their contract with American Airlines, for example, the Jacksonville Jaguars saw their travel costs double to $4 million a year as they chartered an Atlas Air 747, and remember, those $4 million pay for the travel costs to a mere 8 away games. But the NFL's most daunting logistics problem is not this. Their most daunting logistics problem relates to the NFL's other big problem: expansion. You see, part of the reason the NFL is the most valuable sports league in the world is because of how saturated the football market is in the US. 57% of Americans identify as NFL fans. That's an amazing level of market saturation for what is, at its core, a business, but that also presents a problem because, with such a high proportion of the population already fans, it's quite difficult for the NFL to expand their audience, at least within the US. In the past decade or so, the league has turned its attention internationally. The NFL now plays regular season games in Mexico City and London. These cities don't have home teams, but rather, 2 teams from the US will come out and play. For the most part, these international games are about promoting the sport in these 2 countries which already have significant fan bases watching the sport on TV. There's never been more than 1 game a season in Mexico City, but in London, in the 2019 season, they're playing 4 regular season games.
This is better now, because I was going to speak about this. I know they're doing more games than ever before now. In England, they're doing some in Germany, right? Back when they were originally doing it, it was 1 game a year, and the tickets were impossible to get. And it wasn't even people going who were like massive NFL fans. It was just people with like a lot of expendable income who just wanted to go to Wembley and just like get their Instagram photo and whatnot, you know. It wasn't really people who were actually going to become fans of the sport. So they always needed to do more games. I know that takes more games away from you guys, but if they do want to grow the fan base, you can't just go to London once a year because those tickets are going to go to not real fans. Honestly, it's just going to be business people, celebrities, and your average fan isn't going to be able to get a ticket to those games, which is a shame. The other thing I'd say is don't just go to London, come to the north, you know, come to Manchester. That's where sports really is, in the north in England. Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle. Go to one of them, then you'll get the real sports fans, the hardcore sports fans. That's what you should also do. And the games, like, it's good to get fans in at that moment, but the biggest problem that they're ever going to have with like transferring a fan base over to Europe is the time zones, man. Time zones make everything tough. Watching those games is tough. I don't know how you get around that problem though.
With the 16 regular season games per team per year, any other city that has a resident NFL team typically only has 8 home games, meaning London's quantity is really not that far off. What's more, the Jacksonville Jaguars are designated as a sort of home team for London and therefore play at least one of their games there each year in an attempt to give the city and country a clear team to root for. The league has even said that it plans to eventually have a full 8 games per season in London, the same as any home city in the US.
That'd be great.
The reason there are now so many NFL games in London is because the sport of American football has gained significant inroads in the UK audience. The NFL estimates that it has 13 million fans in the UK, 4 million of which watch regularly, and 47,000 of which buy games to every single NFL game in the UK. Its dedication to the
Maybe I'm completely wrong then with what I'm saying.
UK has become so significant that it contributed $12.5 million to the construction of the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in North London. This recently opened stadium was built to become the home of the NFL in the UK. It has a permanent synthetic American football pitch under its grass soccer field, purpose-built NFL-sized locker rooms, and a media suite built to the preferences of NFL press. In the coming years, at least 2 NFL games will occur each year at this stadium. Now, the logistics of these international games in London are formidable. When the Seahawks played in London in 2018, they had to ship 1,150 rolls of athletic tape, about 4,000 pounds or 1,800 kilograms of medical supplies, 350 power adapters, 500 shoes, 240 pairs of socks, and tens of thousands of other pounds of equipment to the city weeks ahead of their arrival. Months before, they had to arrange for many of their players who had never left the US to get passports. The team's trainers had to carefully schedule their players' sleep in the week leading up to reduce jet lag. There's even a hotel in Watford with a purpose-built American football practice pitch that teams typically stay in. While these London matches come at great difficulty and force teams to sacrifice a coveted home game, the teams and their owners seem to tolerate them given their infrequency and the promise of the UK market. But the promise of the UK market could push the NFL to stretch beyond 8 international series games a year there. You see, there is some very real, very serious discussion of putting a National Football League team in London. There is little doubt that the city and country could support a team in terms of fan base. The issue, according to the league's commissioner, would be having one solitary team stationed more than 3,000 miles or 5,000 kilometers away from the next.
This doesn't make any sense to me to do. Honestly, it doesn't. As much as it would be great for people in England, it doesn't make any sense to have one team so far away. I think the only way you can possibly do it is to, if you're going to do it properly. Don't just send one team. You need to send like 4 teams to Europe. Set one up in England, Germany. I don't know if it's big in Italy, Spain or France, or even 2 between England and Germany, 2 each. And create its own division out there so those guys can play each other more frequently than they have to play the American teams. You know what I mean? If you just send one, what division do you put them in? What conference do you put them in? That's a massive disadvantage to whoever's division they are in. It's tough. I guess there's smarter guys than me working on it, but I'd say if you're going to do it properly. Don't just send one team. You need multiple teams. They have to have their own division.
It would be an immense logistics problem considering that, for the weekly games, teams would have to take flights as long as 11 hours, crossing up to 8 time zones. On the flip side, this London NFL team would have to travel continuously throughout the US for weeks at a time since, practically, it wouldn't make sense for them to return to London between the weekly games. This would come at enormous expense, would likely impact their performance, and prove unpopular with their players. In addition, as the UK does not yet have significant American football talent, the majority of this team's players would come from the US and would need to be persuaded, either monetarily or otherwise, to live outside their home country. Those are just some of the cost problems. Beyond that, it is not cheap to fly a whole NFL team over the Atlantic every week. For the International Series games, teams were flown on chartered Virgin Atlantic 747 or A330s arranged by the league, but if London had a fully fledged NFL team, it would likely be treated just like any other team, meaning both them and their American competitors would have to arrange their own flights. The wide-body planes teams would have to charter to cross the Atlantic come at a cost of up to $50,000 per flight hour. That means that transatlantic travel costs, just in terms of the flight, would be anywhere between $650,000 for an East Coast team or up to a full $1 million for West Coast teams. Teams also tend to carry tens of thousands of pounds of cargo to each away game, which would further escalate the cost. While such an expense would be little issue for large, wealthy teams like the Dallas Cowboys or New England Patriots, teams with smaller budgets like the Detroit Lions or Cleveland Browns would certainly have more of an issue with potentially adding an extra $1 million in travel costs. But this level of team isolation is not unprecedented. Further west, in the middle of the Pacific, the University of Hawaii has a Division I college football team, the Hawaiian Rainbow Warriors. The closest team in their conference is 2,600 miles or 4,200 kilometers away in San Diego. To get there, they take a 5-hour flight. That's only an hour or 2 faster than it would take a London NFL team to get to its closest competitor, the New England Patriots. While the furthest team in the Rainbow Warriors Conference is only a 7 or 8 hour flight away in Colorado Springs, Colorado, they do play a number of non-conference games each year which take them all the way to the US East Coast, an up to 10-hour flight away from Honolulu, which is almost exactly the same as the longest required travel time for an NFL team to London. Not only that, but the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors also have to balance their time with class schedules, which means that they travel to their away games far closer to kickoff than NFL teams typically do to London. The Rainbow Warriors regularly rack up more travel miles than any professional football team. For example, in one particularly grueling month in 2016, the team started its season with an international match in Sydney, Australia, then the next weekend played in Ann Arbor, Michigan, then the weekend after that played in Tucson, Arizona, meaning they flew 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometers in just 1 month.
It's a tough college life.
The Rainbow Warriors also make most of their trips on commercial flights, making their travel even more difficult than that of NFL teams. Now, this does potentially give the team a more significant home field advantage since they're used to playing with jet lag while their opponents, when they fly to Hawaii, would not be, but it also supports the view that, logistically, it would be possible to add an NFL team in London. There are even professional sports leagues that already regularly require travel over similar or greater distances. The Continental Hockey League, for example, has teams spread out all across Asia and Eastern Europe, meaning the teams from Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, and Beijing regularly have to travel more than 4,000 miles or 6,500 kilometers to play the teams from Minsk, Riga.
How many people are on an NHL team? It's like, what? There's 5 on the ice, right? And then, what? You probably got like 15 players or something.
And Helsinki. An even more extreme example would be Super Rugby, which has teams spread out across Japan, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. With this, when the Tokyo Sunwolves play the Buenos Aires Jaguars, for example, they have to travel more than 11,000 miles or 18,000 kilometers each way to their match. Part of the NFL's problem is just the pure scale of their competitions, with many tens of thousands of pounds of equipment and
That's what it is. You guys use so much equipment. It's like he's using the comparison to rugby. There's no equipment in rugby. There's no padding. There's no helmets. You just need you could carry what you need in a little sports bag and you're good to go. You know what I mean? It's there's no specialized fitted equipment to each player. NFL is tough for that reason, or American football is tough for that reason. The equipment that you need to play the sport.
Just the pure scale of their competitions, with many tens of thousands of pounds of equipment and many hundreds of staff traveling to each game. The problems are surmountable though at a cost, but this cost would be partially burdened by every other team in the league. The question is then, given the promise of adding a whole new country to the league, is the cost worth it?
Okay guys, we're going to leave the video there. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about NFL team eventually ended up in London? Do you like the idea? Do you think it would be good for the NFL? Are you opposed to the idea if your team has to lose one of its home games a season because you only get 8 to give it up to the English, you know? How would that make you feel? Please let me know down in the comments. It would be good for me, obviously, but I don't know if it's a good idea. I really don't. I don't know if every team having to pay out that money to go and travel there for games is worth it for the league itself. But I don't know. If they find a way to make it work, it would be amazing. But you guys let me know your opinion, because you're more educated on the topic than I am. If you did enjoy the video, please do like the video. Subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more sports reactions and USA reactions coming. I will see you for the next one. Take it easy, guys. Peace.